state. Let's think about this example. Say we want to make an app that has a text component and a button. When we launch the app, we want this text to be set to 0, and every time we click the button, we want to increment that text by 1. We can use state to keep track of the current count. Typically, state is used to track any component data that changes over time. One of the really good things about state is that every time a state variable updates, the entire component will re-render. So this makes life really easy for us. Before we talk about how to use state, we first need to introduce hooks. React hooks are a way to add functionality to React components beyond just creating and returning JSX expressions. So the two hooks that we use a lot are useState and useEffect. Now these are just functions, but we can call these functions in certain ways within our functional components that give us additional functionality. We can also create our own hooks, which we'll take a look at in a few lessons from now. So the useState hook is the most basic hook because all it lets us do is declare and use local state variables. So here, the useState hook declares a state variable. The variable that we're tracking here is this variable called count. And you can see that there's count and set count. So count is the value of the state variable, and set count is the setter method that lets us update that value within this component. When the button is clicked, inside of the onClick handler, so the function that gets called whenever this button is clicked, we set count with count plus 1. So what we're doing here is we're using the setter function that we got from useState, and we're incrementing count by 1. Count, in this case, is referring to the current count, and as soon as we call setCount with count plus 1, the entire function will re-render, and the label will now say you clicked, and then 1 additional to what it was before times. So the useState hook looks like this in terms of syntax. We declare state variables at the beginning of functional components, and we can pass in initial values for these state variables. So here we set count to 0. We can also initialize these to strings or to objects or anything that we want. The first render creates the state variable using the default value. Future renders use the existing value of the state variable. So no matter how many times the function refreshes, if we don't change that state variable, it'll stay at whatever the value was last time we refreshed it. It won't get reset every single time. useState is a React hook. It's hooking into the React state feature that makes things easier for us.